Welcome to CEO's Library, the 1% Bookshelf. I'm your host, and today we're diving into a book that revolutionized how we think about manufacturing, operations, and business optimization. Imagine your business is a complex machine, gears turning, conveyor belts moving, and products rolling off the assembly line. Now, how do you make that machine run faster, smoother, and more profitably? That's the central question explored in The Goal by Eliyahu Goldratt and Jeff Cox. Published in 1984, The Goal is a business novel that follows Alex Rogo, a struggling plant manager who has 3 months to turn his failing factory around or face shutdown. Through Alex's journey, we learn powerful lessons about identifying and managing constraints, balancing flow instead of capacity, and implementing a process of ongoing improvement. These principles have been applied successfully, not just in manufacturing, but in diverse fields from project management to healthcare. In the next 15 minutes, we'll unpack the key lessons from this classic text and explore how they apply to optimizing any business machine. You'll learn how to identify the real bottlenecks in your organization, why local efficiencies can actually hurt overall productivity, the importance of balancing flow rather than capacity, and how to implement a process of ongoing improvement. Whether you run a factory, a startup, or a Fortune 500 company, the principles from The Goal can help you boost throughput and profitability. So let's dive in and start optimizing your business machine. Our story begins with Alex Rogo, a harried plant manager whose factory is consistently failing to ship orders on time. Despite high efficiency ratings for individual workstations, the plant is losing money and Alex's corporate bosses are threatening to shut it down. This paradox, high efficiency but poor overall performance, is at the heart of the book's message. One day, Alex runs into his old physics professor, Jonah, who serves as a mentor throughout the book. Jonah challenges Alex's understanding of productivity and introduces him to a new way of thinking about manufacturing operations. This encounter sets Alex on a journey of discovery that will transform not just his plant, but his entire approach to management. The first major lesson Alex learns is about identifying the real constraints in his system. In manufacturing, we often focus on keeping every machine and worker busy all the time. We measure success by local efficiencies, how productive each individual part of the system is. But Jonah helps Alex see that this approach is fundamentally flawed. To illustrate this, Jonah uses the analogy of a Boy Scout hike. Imagine a troop of scouts walking in a single file line through the woods. No matter how fast the scouts at the front of the line walk, the overall speed of the group is determined by the slowest scout. In the book, this slow scout is nicknamed Herbie. In your business, Herbie represents your constraint or bottleneck, the part of your system that limits the overall throughput. It doesn't matter how efficient other parts of the system are if Herbie can't keep up. In fact, making non-constraint resources more efficient often just leads to more work-in-progress inventory piling up in front of the constraint. So, how do you find your organization's Herbie? In the book, Alex and his team use several methods. First, they look for areas where inventory tends to pile up. This often indicates a bottleneck just downstream. Second, they observe where expediting, rushing orders through the system, tends to happen most often. Frequent expediting is often a sign of a constraint. Third, they analyze which resources have the least excess capacity compared to demand. This mathematical approach can help pinpoint less obvious constraints. Once you've identified your Herbie, the key is to focus your improvement efforts there. In the book, Alex's team takes several steps to improve their bottleneck operations. They make sure the bottleneck is never idle, even during lunch breaks. They implement quality control checks before the bottleneck to ensure it's not wasting time on defective parts. They offload some work from the bottleneck to other machines, even if those machines are less efficient. The result? Throughput increases dramatically, even though some local efficiencies decrease. This leads us to our next key lesson, the importance of balancing flow, not capacity. In traditional manufacturing thinking, the goal is often to balance capacity, to make sure every resource is fully utilized. But Goldratt argues that this approach is fundamentally flawed. To understand why, we need to grasp two key concepts: statistical fluctuations and dependent events. Statistical fluctuations refer to the natural variability in any process, No matter how standardized your operations are, there will always be slight variations in how long tasks take. Maybe a machine needs an unexpected repair, or a worker is having an off day. These fluctuations are normal and unavoidable. Dependent events, on the other hand, refer to the sequential nature of most processes. Step B can't start until step A is complete, which can't start until raw materials arrive, and so on. When you combine statistical fluctuations with dependent events, you get a compounding effect. Delays stack up, while advances are limited by the next step in the process. This is why a balanced line, where every resource is planned to be at full capacity, is actually incredibly fragile. To illustrate this, Goldratt uses another analogy in the book. Alex sets up a simple game with matches and dice to represent a production line. Each station can only process as many units as the roll of a die indicates. What Alex discovers is that even with balanced capacity, the line quickly becomes unbalanced due to the statistical fluctuations represented by the die rolls. The solution? You need excess capacity and non-constraint resources. This excess capacity serves as a buffer, absorbing the statistical fluctuations and ensuring a smooth flow through the constraint. In other words, you want to balance the flow through your system, not the capacity of each individual part. This leads us to one of the most counterintuitive lessons from the goal. Sometimes you need to reduce efficiencies to improve overall performance. If non-constraint resources are always running at full capacity, they'll simply create more work-in-progress inventory, which doesn't help your throughput and ties up your capital. So, how do you put these ideas into practice? Goldratt introduces a process called the 5 focusing steps. Let's break them down. Step 1. Identify the constraint. We've already talked about how to do this. Look for inventory buildup, frequent expediting, or resources with the least excess capacity. Step 2. Exploit the constraint. This means getting the absolute most out of your bottleneck resource. Ensure it never sits idle, improve its processes, and make sure it's only working on quality inputs. Step 3. Subordinate everything else to the constraint. This is where you adjust the rest of your system to support the constraint. You might intentionally idle non-constraint resources to prevent inventory buildup. You might also change your production scheduling to ensure the constraint always has work. Step 4. Elevate the constraint. If steps 2 and 3 aren't sufficient, you may need to invest in increasing the capacity of the constraint. This could mean buying new equipment, hiring more staff, or outsourcing some work. Step 5. If in the previous steps a constraint has been broken, go back to step 1. Don't let inertia become the constraint. This creates a cycle of ongoing improvement. These 5 steps form a continuous improvement process. As you resolve one constraint, another will become the limiting factor, and you start the process again. This approach ensures you're always focusing your efforts where they'll have the biggest impact on your overall system performance. Now, you might be wondering, if we're intentionally leaving some resources idle and potentially decreasing some local efficiencies, how do we measure success? This brings us to another crucial lesson from the goal, the importance of measuring what really matters. In the book, Alex struggles with traditional accounting metrics that seem to punish him for making improvements. For example, when he reduces inventory, it shows up as a loss on his profit and loss statement, even though it's improving his cash flow and overall financial health. Goldratt introduces 3 key measurements that he argues are more relevant for guiding decision-making. 1. Throughput. The rate at which the system generates money through sales. This is essentially your revenues minus truly variable costs. 2. Inventory. All the money that the system has invested in purchasing things which it intends to sell. This includes not just finished goods, but work in progress and raw materials as well. 3. Operating expense. All the money the system spends in order to turn inventory into throughput. The goal, then, is to increase throughput while simultaneously reducing inventory and operating expense. This shift in focus can lead to radically different decisions than traditional cost accounting. For example, let's say you're considering buying a new machine. Traditional accounting might focus on whether the machine will be fully utilized and how quickly it will pay for itself. But with Goldratt's measurements, you'd ask different questions. Will this machine increase throughput? Will it allow us to reduce inventory? How will it affect our operating expenses? This approach often leads to counterintuitive decisions. You might choose to keep an old, fully depreciated machine running instead of replacing it with a newer, more efficient model. Why? Because even though the old machine is less efficient, it's not increasing your operating expenses. If it's not a constraint, its lower efficiency isn't hurting your throughput either. Or you might choose to pay a premium for faster shipping of raw materials. Traditional accounting would see this as an increased expense, but if it allows you to reduce inventory and increase throughput, it could be a net positive. The key is to always consider the impact on the system as a whole, not just on local metrics. This holistic thinking is what allows Alex, in the book, to turn his plant around and save it from closure. As we wrap up, let's recap the key lessons from The Goal. 1. Identify and focus on your constraints. Your system is only as strong as its weakest link. 2. Balance flow, not capacity. Excess capacity and non-constraint resources is a feature, not a bug. 3. Use the 5 focusing steps to continually improve your system. 4th, measure what matters: throughput, inventory, and operating expense. 5. Always consider the impact on the system as a whole, not just local efficiencies. These principles have been applied successfully in a wide range of industries and contexts. Companies like Amazon and Apple have used these ideas to optimize their supply chains. Hospitals have used them to reduce patient wait times and improve care. Software development teams have applied them to project management through methodologies like Agile and Scrum. The power of The Goal lies not just in its specific techniques, but in the way it challenges us to think differently about our businesses. It pushes us to question our assumptions, to look beyond local optimizations, and to focus relentlessly on what truly drives success. So, I encourage you to take some time to examine your own business machine. What are your constraints? Where are you optimizing for local efficiency at the expense of overall performance? How could you apply the 5 focusing steps to drive ongoing improvement? Remember, the goal isn't to achieve perfection, but to start a process of ongoing improvement. Each step forward creates new opportunities and challenges. By embracing this mindset, you can create a more resilient, adaptive, and successful organization. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of The Goal. I hope you found it valuable and thought-provoking. If you want to dive deeper, I highly recommend reading the book itself. Goldratt's use of the business novel format makes these complex ideas accessible and engaging in a way that's hard to capture in a summary. As always, you can find a full transcript of this episode, along with visualizations and additional resources, at ceoslibrary.com. And if you found this helpful, please consider leaving a review or sharing with a friend. Your support helps us continue to bring these valuable insights to leaders around the world. Until next time, keep optimizing your business machine and never stop pursuing your goals. This is CEO's Library, the 1% bookshelf, signing off.